Hello, welcome to today's Thirsty Politics. We're thirsty for the people, we're thirsty for justice, and we're thirsty in that more romantic sense for decent people. Let's have a look today at Tim Walz, Doug Emhoff, and the rise of non-toxic masculinity, because that's exciting, isn't it? We want to, what do we want? We want people who respect our safety, respect our rights to access medical care in a timely fashion, respect our rights to not be left to bleed out in a parking lot from untreated hemorrhaging resulting from an incomplete miscarriage or placental abruption or any one of the numerous conditions that can affect us if we are pregnant and we require medical care, and for our legal status to be privileged above the legal standing of a non-sentient, non-viable fetus or unborn child. I'm happy to say unborn child because I too celebrated a baby shower when I anticipated the arrival of a baby in some months. I was excited and happy to be pregnant. Lots of people are. Hooray for being allowed to plan a family without being coerced into proceeding with a pregnancy against your will, because the UN recognizes that as a form of torture, and too many states in the United States are imposing that on women, so that they either have to travel to another state in order to obtain the treatment they require for themselves and for their families, and it's generally an unsatisfactory circumstance. So let's have a look. Here's Tim Walz. What's he holding? He's holding a little pig. Oh, well, that's nice. And a writer called John Pavlovitz, who is an author of If God is Love, Don't Be a Jerk. Oh, what a nice sentiment. And it's really important to lean into nice sentiments at the moment when we can safely do so, because there's a lot of people finding their little dopamine hits in the day, not in self-care or puppies or flowers or squirrels, but in a kind of contrarian energy against women and against medical professionals, against established science, against healthcare measures, against anti-pandemic measures. And fair enough to maintain a questioning, skeptical approach to life, but the outright hostility to the common good that's become popular in a few circles is one factor driving us into the arms of fascism for a second time in the United States. And if you hear my accent and you're curious, it's an Australian accent, and I currently live in Massachusetts in the United States. So let's see if we can read a little bit from what John Pavlovitz has to say about Tim Walz and the rise of non-toxic masculinity. All right, when Vice President Kamala Harris announced that Minnesota Governor Tim Walz would be her running mate in the coming presidential campaign, the decision was met with effusive praise from both blue voters as well as a disparate group of politicians and commentators. Walz's effortless warmth, his heart-on-sleeve demeanor, and his undeniable joy for life, which have been apparent for a long time in his home state, have suddenly become a national story. In a matter of hours, people fell in love with the governor, sharing videos of he and his daughter on thrill rides at the state fair, and photos of him being joyfully embraced by schoolchildren and cheerfully holding a tiny sleeping piglet. And in the wake of the announcement of his and Kamala Harris's electrifying appearance in Philadelphia at their first rally, the Christian MAGA right rolled out a telling reply that they surely imagined was a real zinger. They created the hashtag #TamponTimmy. Really, that's where they went. That's all they got. Not only does this desperate response underscore the reality that Republican voters have nothing left but sophomoric name-calling in an effort to emulate their emotionally stunted orange messiah in the absence of substantive critique, but it reveals how hateful towards women and how threatened they are by non-toxic masculinity they are. MAGA don't see how much they expose of themselves by using a female medical product as a slur, the way it reveals their complete contempt for women and their agendas towards them. All right, so that's why Tim Walz, I'm skipping ahead a bit, Tim Walz confounds and terrifies Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, the Republican Party, and the entire MAGA movement. His unapologetic exuberance, his open respect for women, and his quiet confidence in his own skin fly in the face of the hollow, insecure alpha male posturing and the Neanderthal women are less than theology they've been trafficking in. They can't even see how much of a self-own this all is. And that is one of the reasons they are going to lose in November, because America has had it with celebrated misogyny and toxic masculinity. Oh, I hope so. Chime in if you agree, but I'm certainly really looking forward to a time. And on my part, there are those who are suspicious of feminism as cultivating adversarial type hostility towards men. That's called misandry. It's the opposite of misogyny, and men's rights activists often use that term. I celebrate the family and I repudiate misandry. It's not worth collectively harboring animosity towards men. It is true that across history, there has been some kind of periodic division in different fields of labor that have, or different dynamics at play that have compelled women to occupy more of a subservient role in societal circles. But, we're working on it, and we're working on it together. And some people are a little more reluctant than others to surrender what feels normal to them, which is women waiting on them hand and foot. And look, the rise of non-toxic masculinity means we should make space for men to be emotional, to celebrate their own involvement in their family, to feel committed to their children. And we have enough genetic testing strategies nowadays that men don't need to be hostile towards women just to protect their heart from the possibility of helping to raise a child that's not biologically theirs. If you have concerns, you can get a genetic test done, but really you should know who your children are, and you should be prepared to step up and to work towards creating a harmonious relationship between you and your partner if you have a heterosexual marriage, so that Donald Trump and other con artist, grifter, fascists who are very destructive to the interests of the American people aren't tempted to weaponize their divorced dad energy that circulates around too many voters in the male voting demographic subset. We want divorced dads to go. There is hope for them. There is hope for them, and there is more economic stability, and there is less frenetic trade wars that Donald Trump starts, because he imposes indiscriminate across-the-board tariffs on imported goods that destabilize the economy and caused a manufacturing recession in 2019, and would do so again, except to a greater degree, if he proceeds with his populist, pie-in-the-sky promises to solve all of America's financial issues by instituting tariffs. Tariffs are effectively a tax on the working poor and the lower socioeconomic classes, because it's a tax on anybody who's not super wealthy, because the less money you have, the higher proportion of your wages or your income stream you spend on your day-to-day consumption of goods and services. And when they are taxed, because tariffs, researchers have found the cost of tariffs are not borne by foreign companies. They're directly imposed on foreign companies, but the costs are passed on ultimately via American companies to consumers. So when you go to Walmart, an American company, and buy a good that's been imported from China and had a 20% Trump tariff stuck on it, you are paying more, and your take-home wages are less, because your cost of living has skyrocketed. So people have calculated it's effectively a $4,000 a year tax on families. And the families that will least be able to cope with that degree of imposed tax, it's like a reverse Robin Hood situation. Donald Trump is open with his tariff plans, which would effectively steal from the poor to then be redistributed to the rich via tax cuts for corporations and tax cuts for the highest level of earners, in terms of the 1%, people who earn static income from just investing in, just owning things that generate income streams, be they stocks and shares or assets. So I hope that was interesting. Let's go back and scroll down a little bit because I've probably got a few saved bookmarks. This relates to my thirsty point from earlier. Look at Doug Emhoff and Kamala Harris and that hug. So we hope it's soon Madam President and not just Madam Vice President, because really for the world's sake. And just to put a story to it, I'm the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors, and I know how insatiable people's appetite for violence becomes when you have a con artist at the helm of a nation who profits personally from whipping up their supporters into a frenzy of aggrieved violence. And the grievances that Trump stokes with lies, it's like a furnace that he shovels in accusations, unfair accusations against Haitian migrants on temporary protected status visas that he still decries as being, he uses the term illegals or illegal immigrants, but it's not the case. The migrants in Springfield, Ohio have been moving there since 2010, including during Trump's 4 years in office as well, under temporary protected status visas because of the dangers in Haiti. And Haiti paid the United States reparations and paid France reparations for decades upon decades because they threw off the yoke of slavery and then were forced to compensate people who had lost income from losing their property, and it's. So I hear noises, and I'm wondering if I better go. I better go get my daughter. I'll say thanks for listening to those who've tuned in. Please tune in again. Similar time tomorrow if you found it interesting, or recommend this broadcast to your friends. I usually use the hashtag Politea, POLITEA, and sometimes I use thirsty politics because I started that today. Politea. I could be very thirsty for that photograph, and it's a very human emotion to be appreciative of the attractiveness of some people in the public eye. I'm sitting a little awkward with me, but I celebrate that tendency that people have. It's a way to harness joy as opposed to what fascists do, which is harness suspicion and contempt for groups seen as others, and to then be extremely gullible and believe whatever rhetoric is circulating from often Russian paid propagandists, like all the right-wing people who we now know have been paid by people from Russia, Tim Pool, Dave Rubin, etc., and probably Ben Shapiro as well, but people who are funneled money in order to widen chasms in American culture, to convince people more firmly that they are aggrieved and that they have good cause, even when the truth of the matter is that migrants have substantially supported the United States economy, have helped reduce labor bottlenecks, have helped drive up demand for goods and services, and in the case of undocumented migrants, are people who still pay tax but are not eligible for a wide range of the kind of social safety nets that Americans with social security numbers are eligible for. So please feel free to look it up yourself. Harvard Business Review is a publication that has lots of research study results on, on the benefits that migrants bring to the United States, and how businesses are often more likely to be started by migrants and by their children than they are by people born who are born in the United States as what do they call them? It's not just white Americans, and it's not native-born Americans either. Well, I guess yes. If you say Native Americans that aren't first or second generation migrants or children of migrants, then there is a difference in the rate of successful. Do you want me to come down instead? It's between 3:30 and 4:30. Now in the next 5-10 minutes? Okay. Awesome. Thanks, darling. Bye. Well, I can continue broadcasting for a little bit longer then. That's nice. This is a great extract, and we can listen to it together. So the moderator's note unearthed text messages from JD Vance that show he secretly said that Donald Trump thoroughly failed to deliver on the economy in 2020. So after Trump had been in office for 4 years, because it's an under-discussed truth of Trump's time in office that he initiated a manufacturing recession. And actually, I can show you the headline because very few people are aware of this. If you want to have a look, you'll join the elite small number of people who do know this, that the US manufacturing industry was in a recession that was showing signs of spreading to adjacent industries and could have plunged the whole economy into a recession, because the economy relies on a bubble of confidence. And when you pop that bubble, I mean, there was a bubble around Trump in that people had a lot of unjustified belief in his capacity as a businessman because they falsely took a reality show truth to be actual truth. Whereas the truth about Donald Trump's business instincts are that he's a terrible businessman, but a great grifter. He's an excellent grifter. He has the capacity to promote himself and exploit certain elements of the media industry involving recency bias, so the fact they like to have fresh headlines and churn, and he helped supply them with headlines. He leaked stories to journalists about Marla Maples in order to be a topic of gossip and to keep his name in people's consciousness and keep his name in people's consciousness associated with an attractive blonde younger woman as a show of dominance. He played into that. He wasn't faithful to any of his 3 wives, but more importantly, he wasn't faithful to people who put their trust in him in a broader sense. So to the mom and pop investors who believed that he was successful in business and gave them their money, he took that money and then declared bankruptcy over and over again 6 times. And his business practices involved getting the bargains of underpaying subcontractors who worked for him. So building things like the Taj Mahal Donald Trump casino, and then paying people, $1 for every $10 that he had promised initially to pay them for the work, and using Michael Cohen as one of the people, his attack dog, to intimidate people into accepting his grifty, thefty terms. So here we go. Manufacturing is now officially in recession despite Trump's vow to boost industry. It's such an important headline to see. And if you have someone in your life who's a undecided voter or a 50-year-old voter, this really is the headline you should show them, because Trump's had so little honest media attention on this issue since running for office a second time that he's proposing more tariffs. If he had actually been held to account by the media for all the harm that he caused through his very performative economic plans, his performative strongman plans, very typical for a fascist. And if you have read this book, Ruth Ben-Ghiat writes about strongmen, how they rise, why they succeed, and how they fail, which just has a lot of different historical accounts of various despots across history. And the thing is, despots know how to catalyze human nature towards darkness. They know how to provide the words and the rhetoric to be incendiary, to light grievances on fire in order to create light and heat that will then support their political ambitions. And Donald Trump's political ambitions hand in hand with his grifting ambitions, because as you can see now from his sale of watches, Trump watches. He just licenses his name to people who sell products. He doesn't have to exert any effort other than to give permission to use his name. And then he rakes in the cash from his gullible followers who unfortunately are not aware that whilst racist ideas might make them feel clever and superior, what racism actually does is make you gullible and predisposes you to act in an unjust and violent way. So that when the time is right and a despot wants to use you to advance his own interests, he will not hesitate to throw you under the bus, call you to the Capitol to fight for what he falsely claims is a stolen election, and he will cause you harm by any means because his life means nothing to you. Everything's a transaction to him. And for you, the transaction is that if you believe his lies, you go to the Capitol and you attack police officers with a righteous fervor, thinking that you're defending your nation from the theft of Donald Trump's true re-election, then you will face jail time and you will go through the court system. And he didn't use his final days in office between January the 6th and January the 21st to issue any pardons because he understood that would be too politically damaging for him at that time when he was vulnerable, because he had horrified even his most ardent supporters in the Senate because they were there when Donald Trump's rabid, incited, almost hypnotized supporters attacked en masse. So Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell at that point were prepared to speak out. Kevin McCarthy was yelling at Trump to call off his followers on the phone. So Trump at that point, in that period of January 2021, did not use his pardon power whilst he was still in office to issue pre-pardons for any of those people that might be charged as a consequence. He could have, and he didn't. And how does he hand wave that away to his followers? I guess they just say, well, maybe he didn't know our names. So they, I guess, don't really know enough about how a president can pre-pardon someone for a crime before they've been charged with it. All right. This article just covers how he made a lot of promises to blue-collar workers, and his standing with voters was enhanced by the fact that manufacturing was doing well in his first 2 years in office. Many people who don't support President Trump will point you to the fact of the upward trajectory that the economy was on under the Obama-Biden administration, and that Trump was merely riding that upward trajectory for a while until the effects of his own policies, his own initiation of the retaliatory tariff wars that he instigated with American trading partners in China, Canada, and Mexico, were a critical factor in plunging the manufacturing industry into recession. So there is an article I wanted to share, but that's okay. I said we were going to listen to something on Twitter, didn't I? And that was the moderators confronting JD Vance with his own text messages. So let's see if we can. Yes, here's the video. Let's have a look.
Senator Vance, in 2016, you called your running mate Donald Trump unfit for the nation's highest office, and you said he could be America's Hitler. I know you've been asked many times, and you've said you regret those comments and explained you then voted for Donald Trump in 2020. But the Washington Post reported new messages last week in which you also disparaged Trump's economic record while he was president, writing to someone in 2020, quote, Trump thoroughly failed to deliver his economic populism. You're now his running mate, and you've shifted many of your policy stances.
Dang. Sorry, my bad.
And you said he could be America's Hitler. I know you've been asked many times, and you've said you regret those comments and explained you then voted for Donald Trump in 2020. But the Washington Post reported new messages last week in which you also disparaged Trump's economic record while he was president, writing to someone in 2020, quote, Trump thoroughly failed to deliver his economic populism. You're now his running mate, and you've shifted many of your policy stances to align with his. If you become vice president, why should Americans trust that you will give Donald Trump the advice he needs to hear and not just the advice he wants to hear? Senator Vance, in 2016, you called your running mate Donald Trump.
Oh, I would love to hear his response, except it would probably infuriate me. But the good thing is, at least that question was asked. You disparaged his ability to deliver his populist response. And that's because Donald Trump couldn't help America's blue-collar workers, because his policies are anti-economic success. His trade wars instigated a massive loss of profit for the agricultural sector. So there were farmers who lost millions of dollars in expected profits from their crops because China would no longer buy their crops in retaliation for the tariffs that Trump had imposed on goods imported to the US from China. And Trump felt compelled to issue, how many millions do you think? 28. Oh, geez. It's not 28 million, is it? It's 28 billion. Trump paid farmers 28 billion. And even then, that's not accurate, because he didn't pay all farmers. They didn't equitably or justly share that $28 billion. The biggest beneficiary was a corrupt person. Anyway, he didn't deliver it to all the farmers. There were smaller farmers who missed out. And the biggest beneficiary of the farm bailout program was a corrupt Brazilian billionaire. Oh, that's great. Of course it was. With ties to the Maduro regime. Oh, and just to note, yesterday from that Vance was straight up lying about Trump saving Obamacare. He was trying to repeal it. Everybody should know that Trump was trying to repeal Obamacare. He was very angry with Arizona Senator John McCain at that time, who gave a thumbs down to vote against that legislation proposed to end Obamacare. And Trump had been talking for a long time about replacing Obamacare. He never came up with a replacement proposal. And in the recent debate between Madam Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump, she asked if he had his plan yet and what it was. And he was like, we have a concept of a plan. So he has no plans that he can state or describe to the American public. He's just going to destroy people's access to healthcare. He's just going to enhance the vulture qualities of insurance that people might remember from before Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act, when people who had pre-existing conditions such as asthma, or if they were elderly, having previously had cancer, or a host of conditions, they could not obtain. Insurance companies were free to refuse them health insurance, and they were stuck high and dry. All right. So let's find out, what was the name of the Brazilian? At the beginning of former President Donald Trump's 2024 campaign announcement speech, he touted what he considered to be several accomplishments. Oh, shoot, I do have to go. I just remembered. I promised to take my children to a play date. Okay. Thank you for listening. Take care, and all the best. Tune in again on another time. Please Google Trump's tariffs for yourself. Please Google his $28 billion relief fund to farmers. He didn't do one to manufacturers, and they were struggling and in recession even before COVID hit. The economy was reeling from Trump's bad decisions, and he's promised to double down on those bad decisions for 2024 if reelected. You should do your part to have important conversations with people. If you know any undecided voters, please recommend to them this article called the LA Times 2019 article, Manufacturing is Now Officially in Recession. So if you Google the phrase manufacturing, recession, and Trump, and LA Times 2019, or even a smaller number of those words, you will do so much to help give you a point to get across to your undecided friends who might still think that Donald Trump has any economic credentials to speak of. He doesn't. He inherited $413 million from his father. His rate of return is bad. And the money that he does have is effectively stolen money from ripping off investors and then declaring bankruptcy and keeping their money. He's terrible at all his business enterprises. He's just really, really good at profiteering from other people's gullibility. Thank you. Take care of yourselves. Don't forget to register to vote. Check that your registration is still active because of all the Republican voter suppression measures that have been instituted in a number of states now. And keep speaking out, speaking up and speaking out to your friends and family. Thank you. Bye.